Hello, I'm Somi Arian. I'm a tech philosopher and the founder of Impeak. My guest on today's podcast is Chris Wallace, formerly a proof artist and now the founder of UltraDAO, building a passionate community of creators, collectors, and fans interested in decentralized IP and brands. So without further ado, let's dive right into the conversation with Chris Wallace. So, you can, imagine that I probably don't know a lot about your work, Chris. I have heard a lot about woodies. I don't know enough about that. I don't own one. And I came into the Proof Discord a few months ago, and I saw that people were talking about you and woodies and different things that you do. And then I discovered UltraDAO. So imagine like I have met you now in a party in like a dinner, and I ask you what do you do. So what's your elevator pitch?
Honestly, like that's actually a really great question. My wife doesn't even know how to explain it to anyone, right? So people ask her what I do, and she says that I'm like some sort of digital art dealer, which is such an oversimplified thing, but it is funny. So when I got into the space, like I was just interested in digital art, and somebody invited me to Foundation, which is just a minting website for NFTs, and I learned about NFTs through that, and then kind of got hooked, and eventually started collecting, turned it into more than just a hobby, and founded UltraDAO, which is basically a collective of artists. And through UltraDAO, we decided to launch Woodies, which is a PFP project. And it has a little bit more meaning behind it than like your typical PFP project. There's a very environmental theme. We donated $250,000 to charity, which planted like over 1 million trees, which is a really cool thing to be a part of, which I couldn't even have dreamed if you would have told me, a couple years ago that I would quit my, high paying executive job to go start an artist collective and plant a bunch of trees and, stuff like that. Like, I just would have been like, no way, like, that's not legit. So that's kind of the origins of it. And then from there, I mean, we wanted to sort of build this Web3 community together. We want to, bring collectors and creators together as much as possible and add value to the space. And so that's where UltraDAO is now. In addition to sort of building the Woody's brand and producing content and sort of building the lore behind that project, we're also working with artists to release collections and reach collectors outside of their sort of sphere of influence, and teach them how to sort of interact in a healthy manner, right? So that they can put their work out there on the blockchain. They can get new collectors. They can build their sort of build their collections and have a long-term plan for how they mint their work. So
That's interesting. In some ways, that sounds a little bit also like what Proof is doing, right? So, Proof has got their artists, and then they basically help them, reach a bigger audience, etc. Is it quite similar in that sense? Would you say?
yeah, I would say it is similar. I think for us, we've always sort of been art first, in the sense that like our main goal wasn't just to sort of build sort of this like tremendous empire of like NFTs and things like that. It was really more to help artists and sort of establish a group that supports each other. But I think Proof really has like like the way that they approached it was just a little different. And they sort of started with that all encompassing Proof membership, and then got into the PFP side, and then sort of it's developing more into, I would say, like a software business, which is not, I mean, it's not exactly where we're going with it, but it is similar in that regard with all the community building aspect.
Yeah, so I think in some ways you could say that pretty much most NFT communities are quite similar in in
Yeah,
the
for
sense of like
sure.
everybody's trying to build a community right now. I think over time this is going to change, and there's going to be a lot more differentiation. But right now, pretty much everybody is doing this thing of, okay, we are going to mint a certain number of NFTs, and then we are going to go into this Discord. I think you're starting to see some of this changing. Like, for example, we have our own platform, but we are initially going to use Discord for the chat functionality, and then have all the sessions and everything on the platform. Okay, so so can you tell me a little bit about, like when I came into UltraDAO, what is that token that I bought, and what's this new one that we are going to be minting?
Yeah, so there's two different NFTs as a part of UltraDAO. So one is a creator membership, which is what you're a part of. The creator membership really is that side of the UltraDAO that like fosters, the creator, like how do I mint, how do I build a project, who should I be marketing to, how do I get connected over from Web3 to maybe like Web2 communities. It's really to help the creator in every aspect. And so we want to deliver content that helps them understand how other creators maybe did it, and what insights they can glean from that. We also want to help connect them up with people that can help them build projects, so developers, designers, really anybody that's coming in maybe from a Web2 background that's dabbling in Web3 and wants to build a project not just by themselves but with others. We really want to connect people from that community together, and sort of help them on their way to being successful in Web3. So that's the creator membership side. And then on the other side, it's the Ultra Pass, which is our collector utility token. The Ultra Pass basically allows you to sign up for drops that our creators are actually producing, right? So we're going to have two collections. One's going to be curated, one's going to be community oriented. So there will be drops that happen kind of across the range of different types of art, different artists that are voted upon by the creator community and released to the collector community, so that they can sort of be introduced to our creators through those drops, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So before the whole NFT craze, in some ways, buying art was not so much of a thing for the average person. Like, for example, I'm a business owner, and like have a lot of different interests, but it's like I didn't wake up in the morning thinking I'm gonna buy art. But because of the NFT space, art has become something that people are buying, trading, speculating on. I very much agree with what 6529 said about the fact that NFTs are essentially altcoins with a JPEG. I think that's what it is, right? If we see it from that perspective, it does make a lot more sense as to why people would buy it and trade it. But that also means that as new people come into the space, it's going to be a lot more saturated, a lot more difficult to get those, into people's top of mind. So then you need to have a lot of new people coming into the space to buy those as well, because otherwise, like a small group of us just sort of buying it from each other. So with what you're doing now, like, of course, Kevin has got his one going on with Proof, and then there are other ones, like, for example, there's the Relics guys. I don't know if you're familiar with them. So they are also doing something similar in the sense that they were originally a Web2 model of bringing art to people. You would go in and order prints of different sizes, etc. So now they're bringing that into the Web3 space. I just wonder, how much demand do you think there will be for all this art being generated? And let's say, for example, if I buy the new pass, like okay, I will get these drops. So what am I gonna do with them? Like I'm just
Yeah,
asking from the viewpoint of like a complete outsider. Like people listening
totally.
to this podcast will be thinking, okay, how much art can I, have, and what does it mean? I'm just spending money, right? So what does
Right.
that mean, right? So can you try and explain it to people looking from outside?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that's if you would have asked me a lot of these questions before I entered the space, I would have been like, I don't know why I would buy art on the blockchain or what have you, right? Like I didn't understand it either. And I think where it unlocked for me was, I came into this space and, started looking at, all of the just amazing artists that I'd never heard of before. Like I'm not from the traditional art world. I don't have an art history background. But when I saw how the technology was sort of enabling artists to put their work out there on a global scale and connect with other people who want to support those artists, who want to own their work and say that they have a piece of that sort of cultural history. um, I realized how important it was because, like, you're right. Like when I look at my house and all the places that I could hang art, there's a limited amount of wall space, right? Like I can only have so much, and I'm typically going to, the Hobby Lobby or some place down the street where you can go pick up a print or like fake canvas reprint of something, and cost $5, $10, $100, whatever it is, right? And you put it on your wall, and that's the end of it. But I think what's really interesting with this new technology is the ability to not only own these pieces, but to have that connection with the artist to where they're actually offering printing services. They're saying, hey, if you own one of my NFTs, you can get this printed, you can have it signed, shipped to you, and hang it in your house as well. You could actually put it on a digital frame. That way you can hang really an unlimited number of pieces. You can sort of rotate them, right? And then you'll always have them in your wallet at the same time. So you can always look at them on your phone, on whatever devices that you have, things like that. And we're still early in that regard in terms of the possibilities, which are going to be pretty impressive in just a few years' time. But I think like what's really, really cool is we have the opportunity to sort of shape what the most important, experiences look like for digital art on the blockchain today. And when you look at experiences that like Bright Moments, which is doing some amazing things, in person experiences, live minting experiences, things like that. I think that's really where the future is with what we want to do, is make experiences for minting, not just release a bunch of art, right? The art is important and it's interesting and we want to share it with the world, but we also want to curate our own experiences that are uniquely from us and from our artists. So I think that's where we have a really cool opportunity. And there's only a few organizations that are really doing that in a compelling way today. And there's going to need to be a lot more for this to reach a mass adoption sort of level, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what? So you mentioned a few organizations. Do you want to do? Can you name a few?
So I think Art Blocks is doing some really cool stuff. They're enabling some really interesting live minting experiences. I know, um, gosh, I'm trying to think of who all. Um, I think Bright Moments is probably my favorite just because they have a series of events that are actually connected around the world that people are trying to, they want to basically get access to every one of those events and be able to mint, all of those tokens and basically complete their collection. Which I think that has a lot of demand because it's such an exclusive thing to collect very high end tokens that then you'll have that it's just a massive flex for a lot of people to basically say, hey, I have one of each of these, and you can put them up in your house, you can put them up in a gallery, right? Like people are very interested in collecting, and I think what's exciting about that is you don't have to fill a closet with collectibles, like back in the day, you've got Beanie Babies, you've got all these, uh like toys and boxes of cards. You would literally have to just stack them up in your house. And there are people that have rooms full of these, collectibles, and like you don't have to do that anymore. And that's really exciting for a variety of reasons. And you can sort of take them with you everywhere you go in your pocket. And I think like that's such a natural thing for like the future generations that are being raised right now. They're playing video games, they're getting skins, they're getting access to these digital collectibles, and they're not on the blockchain. I can only see it becoming more and more native for them to sort of own these things, digitally, and have a record of their provenance, and sort of like know that hey, like this is normal. This is how we trade things digitally, right? Like it's just going to become second nature. It's kind of like when movies first came out, right? Like it was very awkward. Like at first, movies when they came out, it was like silent, films, and they just had like these really basically shorts where it's just people doing stuff, and it was like very awkward. And that's kind of where we are with the NFTs. And people were like, why would I want to see like just a moving picture? I don't understand it. Is it entertainment? I don't know. And I think for art, like we're kind of at that point with this digital art sort of renaissance, is we're starting to unlock and understand the potential of it. And that's what I think is really, really interesting, is like figuring out, okay, but what is it going to become in the future? And I just want to be a part of it. I want to help define it as much as we can.
Yeah, no, super interesting. I get that. I often try and explain to people that the blockchain and what's happening here is something new under the sun, that you have to think of it in terms of no previous paradigm, really. That
Yeah.
it's a whole new paradigm being defined. And if you are not at the forefront of it, if you're not involved, then you don't have a say in what it becomes in the next few years, and what it looks like. Um, okay, so and also it's an opportunity for people to potentially pick up some really interesting pieces that could become very valuable in the future. Um, okay, so that part of it now I understand. Now let's talk a little bit about IP, and like you had some very interesting viewpoints about what happened with the Moonbirds moving to CC0. So with the pieces that the artists that you are managing, and or maybe managing is not the right word, that you are trying to bring into this space. So let's say when we buy those pieces, what's the IP rights going to look like? I've never really looked into, for example, things like squiggles, like things like that. I haven't actually looked into what you can do with that and what the IP rights are with things like that. But in general, from the viewpoint of like art, not PFP, like like abstract art,
Mhm.
or generative arts of other forms, what's your experience of what's the typical IP rights for these things, and then how do you think that might change over time with this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think for us, like we're really looking to do projects that are all over the spectrum, whether that's CC0 or full, rights reserved type of, projects. So it's really up to the artists to what their, level of comfort is exploring those and experimenting with those different types of licensing. For Woody's in particular, we decided to go with, all of we basically separated it into two collections. One is our core characters, and the core characters, all the IP is owned by us, by UltraDAO Studios. So that allows us to sort of take it and do really whatever we need to do to sort of grow the brand and the lore and everything around it. And then the generative characters, we license those to holders. So as a holder, you can do sort of whatever you want to do with that, license it, or make derivatives off of it, whatever that looks like. So that's our approach with Woody's. Now, one thing I have thought about in the past is, like, what if we were to pursue like a CC0 licensing for Woodies. It's not something we're currently like, seriously considering, but I would actually, just based on what I've seen in the space, I would actually lean more towards actually opening up the IP for the core characters and, sort of all the lore behind Woodies, because I actually think that's what has the most potential to go viral is stories and specific characters, right? I think where people sort of go down this path of thinking about IP rights for, one of 10,000 moonbirds, for example, right? Like, yeah, moonbirds might be well enough known that you could do something with that, but at the end of the day, like I think you really have to have a very specific character, and you have to have a very specific story that is worth proliferating to the degree that CC0 helps aid in that, right? I think with someone like Xcopy, who really is sort of at the forefront of this like crypto art movement, it makes a ton of sense for Xcopy to license their work as CC0, because what it does is it empowers people that are a part of that movement and who have bought into that story. It allows them to sort of proliferate those ideas and that content. And Xcopy's really created a whole new genre of art. And there are a ton of, what people call maybe copycat artists, but people that are basically taking that Xcopy style and turning it into their own thing. And they're, riffing on Xcopy's actual, body of work, in addition to creating their own new content and their own new art. And I see that being a much more valuable type of project or type of art to sort of license under that CC0, license. So when you look at something like Moonbirds, though, you go back to that, it's like, I just don't know where that storyline is yet, right? Maybe there is one. I just don't see it being, quite as impactful as something like Xcopy, or something that is the story that people could then pick up and sort of morph into something that is their own, that they could then trademark and sort of build a business off of, or what have you, right? So that's where I get a little bit, hung up on, does CC0 even matter for a lot of these projects? I don't know. I frankly don't know. Because there's a lot that you can do even with projects that just give owners the rights directly and license those projects to the holders, or even things that aren't licensed in that way. I mean, there's a lot of art out there that falls under fair use and parody, and you don't even really need a license to riff off of it in the right way as an artist, right? Like, you have protections in place for a lot of the things that people are doing. I mean, you look at music, you've got Deadmau5, who has sort of the Mickey Mouse ears, that he's sort of taken, and it's taken on a life of its own, really, as a brand. He's not licensing that from Disney, right? So you look at a lot of that stuff, and it's really more the story, it's more the lore behind it. And I think those are the things that really power it, is movements, not necessarily just a piece of art that you created. It has to have some meaning to it.
I have to say that about the whole CC0 thing, I don't yet have a strong opinion. I just don't know enough about it. My first reaction was that, why is Kevin comparing it to the things like MFers and what was another one? Oh, goblins that are essentially no roadmap, no, not even a Discord. Like, why is he comparing Moonbirds to those? And I was just like quite concerned, initially about that, which is why the first question that I asked him was like, you said you wanted to make this a top 5, PFP, and what does that mean now? If it's which he said, no, 1,000%. We still want to do that. So so I have to say, I wasn't thrilled with the whole, both with the way that it was communicated, but also with the fact that it was CC0, because I was like, I don't fully understand it yet. And,
Right.
and all I can say is that when I was minting this thing, it said that you will own the IP on the website, and it was one of the things that was like, yeah, like you own the IP is one of the reasons why you would want to buy it, maybe. And it just sort of would have made you think twice if you didn't,
Right.
have it. I think I would have still minted, but whether I would buy it at 30 ETH, probably not, because
Yeah.
if you spend that much money on something, you want to be able to kind of do something with it. If I wanted to do something with my bird, that I always thought I would want to do something with it. I was like starting to build a little brand around it. But now I feel a little bit less inclined doing it, because then anybody else can do it, because
Right.
it's like, and I understand the argument about, okay, that the blockchain is the source of truth, that like, but we are, I think the society, I think it's another 5 to 10 years before that is even, fully accepted.
I think that's a long-term play, right? Like I don't think everyone agrees with that. And at the end of the day, like you have to have enough of society that agrees that that is ownership, right? Like that equates to you owning something. So I agree with that. I mean, it's hard to know though. Like I don't know. It's just it's so new, like you said. Like it's hard to really know what's what, especially when you license it one way and then all of a sudden it's different, it's changed. um
Yeah,
yeah.
my conjecture is that probably this might have something to do with the whole concept of SEC cracking down on NFT projects, and maybe that by being CC0, it might be a way for them to say that we are not. It might be helpful to them saying that we are not a security. So that could be one of the reasons. Like it's just a conjecture. I don't know enough about it. I haven't seen anybody asking that question, and I will definitely ask Kevin if I can get him on the podcast. But I think that there might be something to do with that, and the fact that it felt like it was quite rushed the way that it was announced. So yeah, just wonder whether that's something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean it was very rushed. I definitely agree with that. I think that the team would agree with that as well at this point. And until we get to this future proof, I don't think we'll really know the full plan and why they wanted to license under CZ0 fully until they sort of reveal a little bit more about their plans. So yeah, I'm reserving judgment. Obviously, I'm still holding one of my three birds, which I tried to sell a little bit high so that I could pay taxes and things like that. But I'm still holding mine, still nested, so I'm not super worried about it. And like I said, I don't know how much it really matters at the end of the day. If you weren't trying to license maybe a rare one, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I feel about it. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me greatly, but I realize there are others where it would.
So saying that it's not always necessarily just about the fact that it's a rare, item. It could also be because of the association with who you are and the brand that you build, right? Like, for example, I have my own brand, and like that is building as well, right? And it could be that if this thing is always sitting on my shoulder when I'm doing different things, and like we're building a little journey together, and it's like part of the history of Somi going into the blockchain space, and then like when Somi becomes the future Elon Musk, like somebody might want to do something with that bird, right? Like, and
Yeah.
I could just like send the bird, into a conference instead of myself, like things like that.
Right.
So, but if it's CC0, it means that anybody can do it, So,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get that. I think the idea for these generative projects for me is really digital. It's really like a digital extension of your identity for sure. And that's kind of always been our approach. And we want that to extend into the metaverse and all of these different spaces cleanly, right? So I think you can still do that with CC0, but it is like there's like a sentiment, that changes. Like you're saying, like you feel like, well, it's CC0, so anybody could do this. Even if nobody does, it still makes you feel that way, right? Like, and that's not a great feeling, because like I think the idea of ownership is the feeling that something is yours and belongs to you and it's connected to you in a deeper sense than just a token necessarily, right? That you've paid 2.5 ETH for or what have you. So I think like, yeah, I mean it's definitely hard to sort of grapple with the implications of that, especially when you started out on one assumption and understanding of what it means, and now they've sort of switched it. So I think a lot of us OGs are going to have to like deal with those feelings and figure out sort of how we feel about it. And then for the people that are coming in later, like they don't have to worry about it because they didn't buy under those pretenses.
yeah.
And for them, I don't know how they feel because I'm not in that position. Um, but yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think, we always, our vision for Woody's was always, we want to give holders a digital identity that they can then own and take everywhere. Whether that's if they run a Twitch stream or, they're on TikTok or, wherever they are. I want them to be able to be there as their Woody, like take that identity with you. And so that's why we've been working on like 3D characters and like pixel characters. And we're looking at all these different places that you could potentially extend into and become your avatar. um, and I do think that's really the point of these generative projects, not just opening up the IP so people can build on top of it and turn it into some massive franchise necessarily, right? Like Disney comes along and says, I like the art, I like the story, let's turn it into a movie. Like, yeah, that's great. It doesn't really affect holders in the sense that like people aren't coming for your bird necessarily unless it's like turns into Mickey Mouse. You know what I mean? So it's tough. It's like, yeah, that all could happen. It's likely not going to, and so people just sort of assume that there's these upstream impacts to CC0, just sort of affecting you in that way. And I don't know that that's like, I'm just not confident that that's true yet, right? We'll have to see. It's
Yeah.
just too early to really call.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, okay, let's talk a little bit about your involvement with proof. So, what
Sure.
does it exactly mean to be a proof artist? Were you in any of the grails, or well, I suppose there's been only one before, and the other one we can't talk about. Even if you are in, I wouldn't know, you know. But what does it mean to be a proof artist? What does it mean to have that kind of like that green color on the proof Discord?
It's a good question. I think a lot of us don't fully know. So, I mean, I like to give you a little bit of history. The Proof Discord actually existed before Proof Collective existed. So there was a group of artists, there was a group of collectors who were sort of in this secret, Kevin Rose Discord, way back. I want to say way back, like last year, before Proof Collective was even really an idea. And so from there, like, obviously we were kind of invited to stay in the Discord when Proof Collective launched, and we got passes and things like that. And I think the initial idea really was just like Kevin wanted to bring in artists from a diverse background, like we wanted all types of artists to come in and just sort of be there, right? Like build a community around art and this new culture that's sort of springing up. And so I was just sort of lucky enough to be there at the time, and sort of be included in that because of our Woody's project. And I've been doing art since kind of started getting into NFTs. I've been working in different mediums and doing different sort of experimental things. And so I was just invited to become a part of the artist group. And I was like, yeah, that sounds amazing. I would love to. And that's really as far as it's gone for me. I mean, obviously there have been other artists that have come in that were a part of Grails, that were invited. Maybe they were, a part of Grails and they were invited as artists. And then there were also artists who haven't been in Grails that are, just sort of in Kevin's sphere. Like he's either found them through a lot of the work that, he's done a lot of work with like different DAOs and his own collecting journey. And has sort of stumbled upon different artists and reached out and said, hey, like, we'd love to have you in, in the proof artists, group. So it's just a serendipitous group of, like different people from different walks of life that do art. And I think that's really the extent of it at this point.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting to know because I thought that all of the proof artists had some form of official, either a drop or something. Because in my head, I was like trying to understand it, whether it was similar to like being a Steinway artist. But now I understand it's not quite the same, because I work with Steinway, and a Steinway artist, they first of all, they all have to own a Steinway. So to be a Steinway artist, you have to actually buy a Steinway. And then doesn't mean that just because you have bought a Steinway, you become a Steinway artist. You have to be a professional, like concert pianist, or like a professional, somebody who does this professionally, there's like a whole list of things that so there are only 2,000 Steinway artists around the world. And that's it really, and some of them have passed away, so every year they have a very limited number of people that can apply, or that can become a Steinway artist. So it's like this very, very thorough and like difficult to become a Steinway artist. So this is quite different then. So it's like
Yeah,
basically
absolutely.
to be a proof artist is basically an artist who is a friend of Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, yes.
Yeah.
Though Kevin has been really intentional about reaching out and sort of finding other artists that, he wants to, I think he really wants to bring others in who maybe aren't as privileged as someone like me, right? And expose collectors to their work as much as possible. So I think he's done a really great job at that. Obviously, we can always do better and continue like expanding our understanding of just art around the world. And I'm sure that they'll have bigger plans for bringing in artists and how that is going to work. I mean, they've talked about doing a bunch of different drops throughout the year, increasing the sort of cadence of drops. And I think that's great. Like I love to see it. I think the more we can get away from this sort of like speculative, must mint a grail by some huge name artist that's going to sell for 100 ETH or whatever. Like the more we can get away from that and really get into collecting art because we like it and because we connect with it, I think that for me is the goal. It's not just let's all retire and live off of the money that we made off of the backs of these artists that minted their first projects here. I don't think that's like the long-term purview that we should be sort of striving for. Obviously, like there are going to be artists like that, and there are today many artists that are doing quite well financially from selling art on the blockchain. But I think like for me, it's more about the experiences that we're fostering together that make it feel like a community. Because if it just feels like we're all like day traders, like that's not what I'm here for personally.
Yeah,
So
no, definitely. I agree with you. So let's talk a little bit about this whole recent conversation that has been kicking around in the Discord about royalties, artist royalties. I don't know if you caught that. It was like an ongoing conversation for several days.
Yeah.
So, one of the issues there with that conversation is that, you know, you're lumping in creators like, project creators like myself, for example, we have our NFT drop coming up, and then with artists, and I think from a creator perspective, I think there's a lot of value to having royalties because you spend a lot of time fostering relationship with people, and if they choose to exit, you have to restart building that relationship with somebody new that comes in. So that artist, I see that little royalty as like a slight, compensation towards this new effort that you have to put in to now get to know a whole new person, and like they come in with their own expectations, etc., right? So so in many ways, I think for projects like, for example, something like my platform, which is an education and networking, etc., which is kind of like a Web3 version of LinkedIn, sort of. So I don't think NFTs are necessarily the right way to go. So I think that we will have NFTs for the first 10,000 or so people who join. Maybe like if maybe a little bit more than that. But eventually, I see it as being something where you just buy a token. It's non-transferable. You can't trade it. It's only yours, and you have to use that to access the services. I don't think, like, it doesn't make sense because NFTs aren't generating new revenue for the creator. For the artist, I would say it's a similar scenario from the viewpoint of the fact that there is this expectation in Web3 for the artist to develop a relationship and be there for the and nurture like the collectors, and be there for them. So because of that, I think the royalty makes a lot of sense, because that ongoing churn of people coming in and out of the community. So what are your thoughts on that whole debate?
Yeah. So I mean, I think there's a couple different things that we should separate out. I think royalties as just a business model for a business that intends to grow and flourish probably isn't a great business model on its own. I think we need to figure out like the subscription, like crypto subscriptions that are reasonable and sensible. If you're paying for a product and you want to pay for it while you have the subscription, you should do that. And as a business, like you should be able to expect revenue and understand if I continue to have this number of subscribers and I continue to add this number of subscribers, it means they'll have this much money to then put back into the business or take as profit or what have you. Like that's just good business. And you have to understand those things. And I think with NFTs, it's very hard to understand where you're going to get revenue from when you're operating just on NFT sales plus royalties, first of all. So from a business perspective, to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, except for the very top of the top, like NFT collections where they're changing hands so frequently that those royalties are paying them, crazy amount of money, right? Which is it's just not common. On the other side of it, you look at artists, right, who historically, traditionally haven't been paid well, aren't able to sort of move their work easily, usually are restricted, in terms of like only selling work locally and, going to art fairs and, art in the park and like selling it on the street, stuff like that, right? Where it's like you work extremely hard just to get enough pieces into people's hands where you can make a little bit of money, right? And I think like what is attracting people to NFTs is the idea that it's a global audience, right? It's a global collector base, that anybody can come in and see your art, enjoy it, connect with it, purchase it, right? And pay you, the artist, for, for that appreciation. And then the other thing that's bringing artists in is not only that, but like when they sell it in the future, they're able to make money on those sales automatically, right? And that's really attractive to artists. I think if we don't have royalties, you will attract fewer artists, and you will get lesser and lesser people minting and sharing that artwork. And I just think that's a net negative, right, for the world, to have fewer pieces of art out there and in circulation. Now the highest quality, or the art with, like sort of the best like lore behind it or whatever, right? Like those are the highest cultural impact. Like those are always going to sort of rise to the top in value, and sort of be more recognized by, some of the bigger collectors out there, and things like that. And that's great. And those artists should get paid for that, right? And I think in those scenarios, like I want to see royalties honored, as much as possible. I don't want people, trying to go around them. Obviously, like, yeah, if you own the token, and you just want to transfer it to somebody and have them send you money, a different way, like you can do that. And I guess that's like the perks of true ownership, is that you have the ability to do that. But I personally wouldn't want to see that, and I wouldn't do that as a collector. So, whenever I look at buying art, I'm like, okay, I'm going to look at the whole picture. Who is the artist? What is the art? What is it saying to me? What are the royalties attached to this? If it's an extremely high royalty, that might dissuade me from wanting to purchase that, and that's okay. Like you look at the whole picture when you're making that decision. I think a lot of people ignore that. And then after the fact, they're like, oh, well, I don't want to pay this because this is now, I paid 1 ETH for it and now it's worth 0.06, right? And like, why should I pay them royalties if I lost this much money on it? And it's like, well, but you bought it. Like, you need to take ownership for your own actions, right? And I think like people just sort of get into this place where they're like, sort of desperate to find a reason why the artist shouldn't get their royalties off of it. And I'm just like, I don't know. I just don't feel the same way about it. I feel like, coming from a background as a creative, like, you bought it under those terms, under those pretenses, right? Just honor it, and respect the craft as much as you can, um, when interacting in that way. And I think that's where the blockchain is not just, an enforcement layer, because it obviously isn't always enforcing it, but it's more of a social contract that, is setting an expectation that not only, do you own this token that's connected to this art and this artist, but you sort of agree to follow the things that have been outlined, which is, when you sell it on the marketplace, you pay the marketplace fee, and you pay the artist, right? Like, those are sort of the things that socially, like, are acceptable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that because royalties aren't, you can't bake them into the contract, and that it's just something that has been set by, say, OpenSea, etc. You know, that people are arguing that this is not part of the contract. It's like
You
basically,
can't. Well, you can. So, I mean, technically, you can force people to pay the royalties. Otherwise, you can block transfer of it. Now, a lot of people would argue, hey, is that even real ownership, right? If you can stop me from moving my token around to different wallets just because somebody didn't pay a royalty on it, do I even really own that? And so there's sort of some conflict there, which I think makes sense. There's logic behind that. And you also, I mean, if you do truly restrict it, you also really disable the ability for people to buy and sell, because the marketplaces would then have to integrate with all of those contracts and make sure that, everybody is following those rules. And there would have to be some sort of standard. There is a standard, but like, not quite to that level, right? Like, not quite to the level of like preventing transfer without royalties being received. Which I just think is like, we shouldn't have to go to that extreme. I'd
Yeah.
rather see marketplaces just honor the regular,
Yeah.
royalties that are built in.
I think that it's definitely in relation to art. I think 100% they need to be there, but I think in relation to you know something like proof, this is the sort of thing where you buy that token with a certain understanding of what you think it is, and then there is no try before you buy. You have to pay like 150 grand to join, right? And then it could be that most of the time people would be wanting to sell for two reasons. Either they are not happy with the, if you will, service, whatever you call it, like what an experience, right? They're not happy with the experience and they want to sell because it's not what they thought it would be, or they're just not happy, or they want to sell because they need the money. So like one of those
Yeah.
two things, right? And because of the market volatility, let's say for example I bought my proof pass at 74 ETH, and a lot of the ETH that I bought was at 3,000. Some of it I bought at 14, 1,500, but some of it I bought when it was like 2,700 to 3,000. And then if I wanted to sell it now, it's like 60 ETH. Right now, the floor
Right.
is 60 ETH. And then by the time I also pay royalty, like I'm eating a loss of like something like 24 ETH, pretty much, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah. And I think that's where people are coming from when it's something like proof, where they already have made a lot of money from the, from people. So that's like a very hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. I
I
agree. I
hear
mean,
your,
that's hard. It's hard to justify any of it, right? Like, you go to a country club and ask for their membership fees, and there's an upfront fee, there's a monthly fee, maintenance fee, whatever, right? Like there's all these different things going on, and you don't get any of that back, right? So like if you look at it in terms of how memberships work today and how memberships work in the real world, like in like legacy, clubs and memberships, you don't get any of it back, right? There's no value other than the value that you can extract from the membership itself. And so when I look at it that way, it's kind of like, okay, well, it sort of makes sense, and it's nice that you can get value back out of it if you didn't, have a good experience or what have you, right? Now, yeah, I mean, the market volatility side of it, the value tanking over time versus staying consistent, all of that is problematic, right? But it's a free market, so the way I view all of that is it's sort of like, well, it is what it is, like if you couldn't afford to buy it, you shouldn't have bought it. If you can't afford to sell it with a royalty attached to it, you shouldn't maybe have bought it in the first place. You know what I mean? So I kind of lean more towards this like personal responsibility side of, being smart with your finances and not buying into things that maybe you don't have $250,000 to go spend on a on a special club membership, right? So those are the types of things I look at, and I'm like, would I do this in the real world? Would I go out and join some business networking membership for $250,000 or whatever? No, I wouldn't do that. So I think we're just looking. A lot of us are looking at crypto as like play money and not real money, but we have to stop doing that. Like we have to take ownership that, hey, this is real money. You can sell it today for real money and put it in your bank account and use it. And so that's kind of how I look at it. I think if you buy a token, you better be committed to all that it entails, especially the memberships and things like that. I just recently bought it into the 333 club with Zeneca. Sold my Grails Mint pass, and bought in for like 8 ETH, and it's like, for me, I know that I'm going to get value out of that, just from being a part of that group. And if I wasn't confident in that, I shouldn't have bought it, and I wouldn't have bought it. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, I do feel for people, you know, I mean, the financial side of it is tough. Like if you're spending a lot of money on something, you would hope that it would hold its value. But again, in the real world, like you don't even really have that option to sell later. So
Yeah, that's fair enough. I guess you know, the kind of happy medium that we reached was that as the value of the token goes up, you know, let's say for example, 7.5% makes sense when you are up to say 10 ETH, but when it gets to nearly 100 ETH, you know, then that's like quite a lot. So it would make sense because, like, let's say 1 ETH, 1% of 100 ETH is still something, you know, it's still something meaningful. But if the value of your token is like less than 10 ETH, then, you know, then that's different. So I think one, I look, as a builder myself, I don't know whether I would do this, but one option that I can imagine is that maybe as the value of the token goes up, the amount of royalty could come down.
I can see that being interesting. I think where I struggle with any of it is like I am not the one building proof, right? I mean, yeah, like community is important and everybody that's involved is to some degree, you know, responsible for the ecosystem thriving. But I am not working on the company, the, you know, the projects, the things that they're doing to increase the value of being in proof. And for me, I look at it as it's sort of a shared incentive model. There is something weird about the shared incentive being that you have to sell in order to realize that incentive. Though we do get a lot of airdrops, and you know, obviously I got the mint pass that I sold, and you know, things like that do, you know, sort of pay you back over time. But there is something weird about the incentive model where it's like if you really want to fully realize the value, you have to sell and exit, which I think is such a shame because a lot of really great people are seeing this life-changing money come in and they're like, I gotta get this $100,000 or whatever, right? Like, and you can't blame them for that. That's a lot of money. You know, if
I
you
mean,
minted something for 1 ETH,
yeah,
you got
that's
to
good
take the
for people
money.
who minted for 1 ETH, but for
Right. It's
example,
not great for people that bought at 100
yeah,
for sure. So the yeah, like the range of experiences is so varied. You know, because like you can have people that are extremely happy with proof that bought for 1 ETH, and you've got people that are extremely dissatisfied with proof who bought for 100. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's a
and
really tough thing to manage those expectations, to manage
yeah,
how people feel and the sentiment towards an organization when that's sort of the disparity that exists between, you know,
yeah,
who's in it.
absolutely. And one other, you know, I in some ways, like the more I think about it, the more I'm realizing how bad this business model is because when you buy at high and you come in, you know, you are not only you have paid more than everybody else, but also you are seen as a newcomer, and you're, you know, and like, and you're, it's almost like you're never getting the respect, you know, for from, you know, people who have been there from day one. Like, you know, I came in at oh, so let's say proof has been in for like what, 9 months, and I came in at like say just over 2 months ago, and well, actually it's becoming almost 3 months now, right? And at some point I remember like a couple of weeks ago, when was it, that somebody mentioned to me that you know, you're quite new yourself here, and I was like, what does it mean to be new when the whole thing is only like 9 months, right?
Right.
Like you know, you know,
Yeah.
I've been here for a quarter, like not a quarter, like a third of that time, and I have paid a lot more to be there, right? So the business model is really, really, it like it doesn't make sense, you know. But like I've always read about the fact that, oh, tokens, you know, they will help align incentives. Actually, they don't, and because like in this case, right, you can see how aligning incentives can be like problematic in if you think that you're going to use the token to align incentives, because if people can keep speculating on that token and the price of it goes up, and then you have people who buy high, and like when the time that I bought in, it means I didn't get two moonbirds, like I didn't get all of those, different things. And who knows whether there will be anything like that down the line that I would, make my money back or something, right? So, and at the same time, you are also seen as a new member. So there's all of that dynamic. So it's a very difficult business model.
I think that all makes sense. I mean, it certainly is something we've thought about for UltraDAO. It's not really something we want to do where it's just like we just keep releasing dilutive, new NFT collections over and over. We only have one Woody's collection. There was no, we didn't have oddities, kind of a secondary drop or anything like that. And for us, we're really trying to create, like I said, we're trying to create these art experiences. And I think that has value in itself over time. Whereas these memberships really make it tough to realize that value and have a consistent experience. And knowing what you get. So like Ultra Pass for us, knowing what you get from that, it's art, right? Like you're getting access to these experiences, you're getting access to these artists, and to everything that we have to offer at UltraDAO. And I think like setting that expectation up front is very healthy and can help people sort of understand what they're going to get if they purchase on secondary. Whereas I think with something like Proof, it's like hard to know because they've released three collections of PFPs. They've released 2 Grails. They did the Heart U drop. I mean, they've had all these drops and it's just sort of all over the place. And so it's hard to know if I buy a Proof token today, Proof Collective, what do I get access to that's going to help me? If you're looking from a financial, perspective, like how do I know that what I'm getting into is something that is defensible financially? And that's hard. I mean, it's hard with anything in NFTs today, especially with a bear market. You've got people questioning everything. But I think over time, it's probably not going to get better. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, no, this has been super interesting, very, very informative, and I think a lot of people listening to this will enjoy a lot of food for thought. And like we are very early in this space with our tokens. I've set the end date for them 2024, so that it gives me. I didn't want to have like something going on for ever and ever and ever, because who knows where this space will be, right?
Right.
And it may be that NFTs are not the right answer. So, or maybe that we find a new way to bring value to people, etc. But the good thing is that we know that we already have the value. We've got a platform, we've got the content there, we've got the daily live mentoring. We have the kind of the networking opportunities and all that stuff. So it's very different, but I do worry about token prices going up too much, because when they do, that money is not coming back into the company that you can use it to generate new value for people.
Right.
But from the viewpoint of people who are buying it, they're like, I paid this much for this token, and therefore how do I make my money back? Like how do I get value from it?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's really tough. And I've said this before. I think like as a project moves from speculative to real utility and an understanding of what you're getting, you're going to see all of these prices crater on, and they're just going to get destroyed on floor prices and all of that. Because once you take away the speculative side and the speculative nature of a collection, it trends towards the actual value that people can expect to get out of it. And the same thing is going to happen with Proof. Same thing's going to happen with Moonbirds, right? Like all of these tokens, they're going to trend towards the actual utility value and people are going to look at them as a dollar amount, right? And so I think you're going to start to see that. You're already starting to see that, especially in a market like this, where it's like people are understanding what they're getting out of it, and projects aren't able to just sort of, tease, sort of like interesting looking images on Twitter, and sort of have this mystery behind it, and everybody's like, oh, is this going to get me another 3 ETH airdrop or whatever? You know what I mean? So I think as you trend towards that real utility and a real understanding of the value of a token, you're just going to see people selling at that value level, which I think is healthy for the market long term, and healthy for those projects, because you don't want people buying in when it's inflated, and getting wrecked. So
yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. This has been super interesting. I hope to have you back, in a few months, and see how things have turned out with UltraDAO and everything that you're doing. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Chris Wallace. Be sure to check out UltraDAO and join them if you're an art collector and passionate about all things decentralized IP. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe to it on Apple, Spotify, or any other one of your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to give it a 5-star rating and write a review. The full interviews are also available on my YouTube channel, The Somi Arian Show.